Welcome to this week's Ask Amy episode. We are talking about homeowners associations and the upcoming legislative session. My guest today is David Kahne. You're an attorney. You mostly focus on helping homeowners with their rights when it comes to their HOAs.
Yeah, I've been doing that for about 20 years now. And a fair amount going back and forth with you, and I really appreciate being here today.
Oh, well, thank you for coming in. So a lot of stories that we do, I do call you quite often. So we'll get a homeowner who calls us, whether it's about a fence that they put up that the HOA says, that's the wrong color or wrong material or their door color. And I usually call you and say, what are their rights? What can they do? But before all of these problems in the neighborhoods, all of these rules and your rights are sort of coming from the top down at our Capitol. And so that's where you start. You usually go to Austin every legislative session to sort of advocate on behalf of homeowners. And it sounds like this is something that you have to prepare for months and months in advance.
We do. Everybody prepares. If you want to get stuff done, you have to have your bills in early, and you have to have identified at least some significant sources of support.
Yeah.
Politicians as well as political allies who will help get bills passed. Some years were successful. Some years, not so much.
Well, and I don't want to dwell too much on last year or last legislative session, but it seems like it was a really productive year in terms of things that you all and HOA reform groups got passed on behalf of homeowners.
Last year was a very productive year. You're absolutely right. I attribute that in large part to the realtors. The realtors are a potent political force in this state on many issues. There are at least two realtors pretty much in every town, and they pay attention to the laws that affect their businesses. And we're very pleased to get support from the realtors. They've recognized that in a number of areas, the homeowner associations have abused authority and have done a wonderful job helping us to figure out some ways to rein that in.
Mm-hmm. And before we get in a deep dive into sort of what you guys want to do this year, I said, why is it that I always call David Kahne whenever I have a homeowner's issue? And it's because there are not a whole lot of you attorneys that are familiar with the law and sort of what my rights are when it comes to what can I do in the situation. So how did you decide that this is the type of law you want to do?
Well, there are a few attorneys who are familiar with the law. Most of them are not interested in protecting homeowner rights. They're institutionally interested in protecting the association rights. I got involved, longtime listeners will remember, Geneva Brooks, who was an advocate on many issues. And the one I got involved with her on had to do with homeowner associations. Geneva owned houses, 15 or so rent houses across the Houston area. Mm-hmm. And in one subdivision, North Glen, this homeowner association came after her for having grass, real grass, in the cracks of her sidewalk. And she organized opposition to this and a number of other issues, had a protest of about 200 homeowners is what I recall. And then the homeowner association sued her, essentially trying to get her to shut up. Mm-hmm. And I got involved more as a free speech issue than as a homeowners association issue. Texas law is really good. The courts will not tell you on pretty much any issue to shut up. And they didn't tell Geneva that. The association then raised a number of other issues, and we counterclaimed with issues, and that case went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court, which issued the first in what has become an increasing pattern of decisions respecting homeowner rights. The Texas Supreme Court has been issuing some very good decisions over the past since then, but most recently over the past 5 years or so.
Yeah. And then you got bit by that bug, and then there were other cases that followed, and then I imagine.
Well, we had the next big one involved a woman who had a beautiful garden in the front yard of her house. She called it a butterfly garden. She had an English-style Tudor home up north of the city at the Spring area, and she had what would, by many people's standards, be called an English garden. English gardens are somewhat wild.
Natural.
Yeah. And she had little paths that went through the garden. And my favorite video of all time on TV was coming and being filmed walking through her garden, and we've lost that video. But that exposed me to more issues, and we've now seen quite a number of issues where homeowners have been essentially denied basic rights. Your home is really where you define your space. And most of us believe we should be left alone in our homes. And many homeowner associations do leave you alone in your home, and that's perfectly fine, and I never hear about them.
Yeah.
But some fail to do that. And one of the sets of issues we can talk about today is what happens when your association is out of control.
Exactly. And you are always the first to say most homeowners associations, or a lot of them are good. And the laws that are passed are not really made for those homeowners associations. They're made for the sort of bullies or the homeowners associations that want to overstep. And then you have these laws that you can refer to because there's not a government agency that you can go to and say, hey, make my HOA follow this law. If they're breaking the law, my only recourse is to take them to court.
Well, you have two recourses. One is to take them to court, and the long-term better approach is if you can vote the bums out. And one of the sets of problems we have is that it is hard to vote the bums out. And so we can have runaway HOA boards as a whole, or we can have runaway individuals who sometimes become almost dictatorial in their efforts to control what their neighbors do.
Yeah, so let's start there. A lot of the things that you mentioned that you want to do in the legislature this session are making rules that I think the vast majority of people would say, oh, they don't already have to do that? Like in terms of meetings and being able to vote board members out.
Well, that's exactly right. The group I work with, so I'm a lawyer, I go to court, I give people advice, and I work with a group called the HOA Reform Coalition. And we are going to be going back, we being the coalition, are going to be going back to the legislature this year trying to confirm important protections for homeowners. The first simplest one that I think we should talk about is in condominiums. If you live in a subdivision, you have the right to vote on every issue that's important. If you live in a condominium, you might not have that right if you owe money, for example, or if you are charged with a violation. That's interesting. So I'm just real quick, what you're saying is that my rights in an HOA are different than if I'm in a condo and have a condo owners association. It's not the same. The rules are different. That's right, because back with Geneva Brooks, that time period, there was also a woman named Winona Blevins. And Winona Blevins, after her home was sold out from under her, inspired the legislature to pass a set of the initial round of due process protections. And those exist for subdivisions, but not for condominiums. And one of the important protections in subdivisions is you have the right to vote. And you don't have that right in condominiums, and we simply want to extend the same right that you have in subdivisions to condominiums.
To be able to vote, even if you're behind on your dues or if they've fined you for a specific violation, you should still be able to vote.
Correct. And one of the things that we've seen, and we used to see in subdivisions, we still see in condominiums, is if the board is interested in entrenching its power, near to the election, they will send out a lot of violation notices, and then those people can't vote. So we want to stay away from that. There's no legitimate reason to prevent people from voting, so that'll be primary. That should be very easy to get through.
Right.
But of course we don't have it yet, so maybe there'll be opposition. I don't know.
All right, so let's talk about the next thing. When it comes to just good government and good policies, I didn't realize there are not term limits for board of directors.
There are not term limits for board of directors, and generally speaking, I think we favor term limits. There is a downside to that, which is that if you have a very good person who's in office and it's hard to find other people to join the board, that can be a problem. So the approach that we're likely to take regarding term limits is to say that there might be a time limit somewhere between 6 and 10 years, and then you have to go off the board for at least one session, which would be 2 to 3 years. And then if you're still the right person for that subdivision, you go back on. But all subdivisions will benefit by having a deeper pool of good people who are informed and can run the subdivision.
Right. Yeah. I mean, who's opposed to that? When you go to the legislative sessions and you guys talk about that, who are the people on the other side who will say, like, oh, we don't really think that we should be doing that, limiting terms?
Well, so term limits is not usually the place where people draw the line, but the groups that are institutionally opposed to homeowners generally are the lawyers and the property management companies that make their living, often a very good living, charging homeowners lots of money for what are, from my perspective, relatively limited benefits. So we have what I have called the foreclosure factory, where even if you own a very small amount of money to your association, and you might need to pay that amount of money, the lawyers will rapidly charge you as much as $3,000 when you get sued. So we want to try to find a solution. One of our proposals last session and this session will be to find a simpler solution so the associations can get what they are owed rapidly, which can range between $200 and, say, $600 a year for a subdivision, and it could be maybe $200 to $600 a month in a condominium. So you want to be able to make sure that the associations, especially in the condominiums, can keep that income stream flowing, but it should be able to be done without letting lawyers collect $3,000 just to get that small amount of money. Banks don't do that. They get their money.
Yeah. On the other side of the coin, I guess, or another issue is records. I always tell people, you have the right. Hey, you're a homeowner. You want to know why this project hasn't been completed and you thought that's what you were paying dues for. Just ask your HOA for their budget, for their contract. And you're like, we might have that right, but then what can happen? Why do you want to talk about this in this next
So
session?
you do have that right. Just as you said, you should be able to, under the law, ask your homeowners association for basic records, budget records, contracts that the association has signed, minutes of meetings, bank records, email addresses of your co-owners if you want to reach out to them to make sure you can contact them about some other issue that you care about, that you want a new rule in the subdivision, whether that's about, can we have soccer goals in the front yard, can we have what are the rules for portable basketball nets? But any rule you want. Do we want to reduce our assessments? You want to be able to contact your co-owners, and email is the way we do it. Many associations will be perfectly responsive, and I never hear about them. But we have thousands and thousands of subdivisions in this state, and there are plenty of subdivisions where the boards will withhold that information for as long as they can, and they are aided in that by management companies who often, for example, don't want the public to know, the public meaning you and your neighbors, to know how much the management company is being paid. So when they do that, the process is very slow. It can take the most recent situation I had took literally 8 months to get basic information. One of the things we learned was the association had literally not done an audit for at least 5 years. Now, in condominiums, you have to have an audit every year. That's what the statute says. We want to have the same law for subdivisions. We don't have that. But if you have it, if the association does the audits, they should be available to the homeowners. Well, some subdivisions will withhold that. So what we're planning to do for that issue, Amy, is to make a list of certain documents that always should be available. Now, audits would be on that list. Contracts would be on that list. Homeowner email would be on that list. The board, minutes of meetings would be on that list. The boards can fulfill that obligation by putting it on a website. And then they never have to do anything again. They just say to the person, look it up on the website. But if they don't, then we're going to want to have a much faster turnaround time for that category of documents, because the documents already exist. There is no basis for withholding them. Now, if the homeowner comes up with a creative request for something that isn't standard, then it's okay with me if the association takes a little bit of time, consults their lawyer, make sure they can give it out. We don't want information given out that would, for example, invade the privacy of other homeowners. So records of decisions by the Architectural Control Committee, I wouldn't want them to know that you, Amy, had applied for and either gotten or been refused a particular permission. But we might want to be able to have the homeowners get some kind of compilation of all of how many records have been, how many applications have been submitted for green paint on the on the front of your house, something like that.
Got it.
And in those situations, there might be a need for a little bit more time, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that it still happens fast, and that if the association withholds the documents, that they can be that we can move the court process very quickly in JP court.
All right. I'm going to stop you right there, because when we come back, we're going to talk about that and also talk about some things and holding HOAs accountable when they don't do things they're already supposed to be doing. And then David wants to talk a little bit about sort of how you can help, how homeowners can help in this whole effort. It's not just David and a handful of other people going on homeowners' behalf to Austin, that we can all get involved. If you have an interest, we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm here with David Kahne. You're an attorney that mostly represents homeowners in cases against HOAs, homeowners associations. So you're talking to us a little bit about issues that you plan to present before the legislature, this next legislative session in Austin. But we said that people can help. I mean, so if you're listening to this and any of the things that David brings up resonate with you because you're like, oh my gosh, the same thing happened to me at my meeting. I wish that my board was required to do this or required to do that, then David wants to hear from you. People should hear your story. Like, why do you want to hear from people?
Well, that's exactly right, Amy. I would stress it's not David wants to hear from you. I work with a group called the HOA Reform Coalition. That's what we're about. My understanding is we have about 1,000 members across the state. The executive director is a woman named Nancy Kosnecki. Maybe you can have Nancy on at some point to talk about these issues. HOAReformcoalition.org. It's not just that we want to hear from you. We need to hear from you. And there are two basic reasons for that. First, we have some ideas based on what other people have told us about what the problems are, but we don't know all the problems. And we need to know which are the current problems, which are the most important. So that's one set of reasons. If you tell us, we'll know. Yeah. And HOA Reform Coalition has a great website, and you can submit your information to that website, and then that will help us learn about problems. You can submit questions, and if we can, we'll help you answer them. The second thing is we need to hear from you to make change, because the legislators prioritize those issues that their constituents care about. Now, we don't have the kind of money we don't make any campaign contributions. We don't have the kind of money to compete with the people who pay to play. The only way we're going to get things done is if we persuade the legislators that your vote is going to depend on how they respond when we ask for basic homeowner rights. And we've had some years where there have been good responses. 2 years ago, we had a good session with the legislature. Then there were several prior legislative sessions where we didn't get very much, and then there have been some in the past as well. It always depends on how many people we can mobilize and how can we persuade legislators that it matters in their home districts. We have one advantage, that some of the overreaching property management companies and law firms will actually go after the legislators, and they don't think about this. And so in one of our very good sessions, you can see it on TV, there were literally a half dozen legislators who got up on the floor of the Texas House and said, this particular issue had to do with sending notices by certified mail. And the management companies didn't want to do that. The legislators got up and said, my association has messed with me. If they will mess with me, they will mess with you. But that was only 6 or 8. We really want all the legislators, and we need to get 100. So contact HOAReformcoalition.org. You can call me if you want me to sue, but if you want to make the change, and that's what's going to help everybody, that's what's really going to make the difference. Let's work with HOAReformcoalition.org and get that information in front of the legislators where it needs to be.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about elections. So whenever you have an HOA, they usually have a board of directors, and how they're elected. That whole process is pretty important. So you're looking for some change there. Yeah.
The problem that we see is that homeowners have a great deal of trouble electing new people. Now, some subdivisions, again, this is not a problem. But in some subdivisions, the quorum requirement is so high that they don't get enough homeowners voting, and the same people stay in office essentially forever. So what we want is a structure that will help achieve quorum in every election. So maybe we start with a quorum of 50% of homeowners. Some subdivisions will get that. If there are only 40 homeowners, they might get that. But if that doesn't work, then we want to cut that quorum requirement in half, and a week later, the quorum requirement should be 25%. And if that doesn't work, a week later, the quorum requirement should be, say, 10%, until we get an actual election, so that when the documents say you'll have board members elected every 2 or 3 years, they actually are elected every 2 or 3 years.
Because what you're saying is they may say, oh, well, we've never had quorum, so in 30 years, we've never had a new board of directors, and the same people just stay on.
Yes, and that's actually a fairly common problem, and we would love to have, I get calls from people all over Harris County, but we would love to have calls from people in Bexar County, Travis County, El Paso, Dallas-Fort Worth. Any of these cities and any of the suburbs around the cities. We have Fort Bend. We have, many, many places where this is a problem. If your condominium can't get a quorum and the same people stay in power, let us know.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the public comment period. Whenever you go to board meetings, or commonly called pop-off, because you want to stand up and you want to talk. I sort of thought that every meeting had this public comment period, but no?
No. The question whether to have a public session for subdivision, for all HOAs at this point, meetings are supposed to be open so that homeowners can observe. And that's been made much easier by having Zoom meetings, and I'm a believer in Zoom meetings. It lets many more people participate. You can participate for the 15 minutes that you have available, even if it's while you're making dinner. You can just listen in. But the other thing that we want is the ability of homeowners to raise issues with their directors, and there are 2 reasons why this is important. The first is the directors may simply not be aware of an issue, and I've seen this come up where someone has said, for example, they're littering in my front yard. They're putting somebody's driving through the neighborhood throwing flyers on the front yard. I want it to stop. And the director said, yeah, that's a good issue. Let's pay attention. And the second is there might be an issue that you care about and the directors don't care about. And if you speak about that issue, then others in the subdivision will know you care and they might reach out to you. So what I think we're going to be looking to do is to make sure that there's a certain number of meetings every year, let's say 4,
right?
Every year, where at least a half an hour is devoted to, depending on the size of the subdivision, I suppose, where at least a half an hour is devoted to letting the constituents be heard. Doesn't mean you're going to get a decision at the meeting, just you get a chance to say your piece.
Got it. We're getting really close to time here, so I want to let you pick the next topic, what you think is most important coming up.
So I think that the other really important issue with elections has to do with the ability to recall directors if they get out of control.
Right.
There should be a flat-out statutory provision allowing recall. There isn't. And the second thing is we need to facilitate having special meetings where homeowners call those meetings so they can recall the directors. And right now, the process allows the incumbent board, the very people you're challenging, to control that. And we've got a number of ideas about how to make that system work for homeowners so they can recall directors.
All right. Well, you have a lot on your plate, and with HOA reform, and this legislature convenes in January. You've got a little bit of time to work on these things. Reach out if you have a story, if you have an issue. We're always doing stories about homeowners and homeowners' rights, and likely I'll probably give David a call and find out what your rights are.
Your first call should be to Amy. The reality is, when she puts an issue on TV, hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, will hear that story, and it can go viral. We've had that happen with a couple of our stories that have just been really astonishing in the abuse that the homeowners have suffered. So call Amy first, but also contact by email, by going to the website, HOA Reform Coalition, and let us know what is going on that's bad, and if you have ideas about what would help, and if you have contacts in the legislature, people who you've already been able to help get elected, and maybe they should pay attention to things you think about, let us know.
All right. And so the name of this is Ask Amy. So also, if you have any questions that you need answers to, send me an email to askamy@kprc.com. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.